Good morning, good afternoon and good evening wherever you are in the world. My name is Paul Donaldson. I'm here to host a session for you, the latest in our series on the digital worker operating model. This session's on maximising return on investment through accelerated bot development. We've got a big audience online, so I would encourage all of you that are there to poll questions. And I'm delighted to be joined today by a couple of colleagues of mine from our professional services group. So first of all, I can introduce Ollie Morris. Ollie's been with the organisation for a year, but most importantly been in the space of digital workers for a long, long time now, having worked in the NHS and other industries as well. A unique talent that kind of understands from multiple angles on how to structure and deploy robotic workforce to get the best results. So I'm delighted that Ollie's been able to join us and equally delighted that Will can as well. So Will's a senior solution architect in our team, and if ever I need a question asked from me internally, Will's usually my go-to guy. So Will is a great balance of technical and business view on the implementation, again, of a digital workforce. So the two of them will be taking us through a range of points, which we'll try and display on screen now for you. So really the question we're trying to answer remains the same and similar to those that we discussed on the last session. So how do we get the right processes developed and in production as quickly as possible? And that's a quote from Automation Velocity. And for the purpose of this webinar, in relation to those of you that attended previous sessions that we've run, this is really focusing on the development side of the robotic operating model. We're also going to give those of you that haven't seen it a view on our A2019 platform, and we're happy to take questions on that as we progress. We hope from this webinar we'll be able to cover these points for you. So the common pitfalls. So what issues can you expect when when building your digital workers? How you can leverage our bot store to accelerate the developers? How can you use pre-built digital workers to increase your velocity and speed of deployment? The roadmap for improving your return on investment. And as part of that, as I mentioned before, we'll be looking at A2019 and very timely looking at how that works in the cloud. That's a big focus point for us as an organisation and a big demand for our customer base. We'll look at the Discovery Bot. Big releases coming your way on Discovery Bots. We'll give you that haven't seen that a lens into the world of process discovery and bots building bots. So finally, before I pass on to Ollie, really just to put this in context of the other webinars for those of you that have attended them, we really focus our development lifecycle on two key attributes: the development or the discovery and development phases, and then the steps you take in production. And we see these are four key elements. So the last webinar was based on discovery and design, so how you identify processes, how you funnel those, and how you end up looking at the right processes based on the desires of your organisation or on the return that you're looking for. This session is solely based on the development and testing phase, so the second pillar along. And then in future weeks and months, we're going to be focusing on the deployment and maintenance stages. So I'll pass over to this stage to our key speaker, Ollie. Ollie's going to take you through a section, a set of slides, and as I said, we'll welcome any questions through the question window as they arrive. So over to you, Ollie.
Great, thanks so much, Paul, and hello, everybody. So yes, we'll be focusing predominantly on the discovery and testing portion of this robotic development lifecycle. So there's many steps which kind of encompass the RDLC, or the development and testing phase of your RPA journey. And this is really a high-level overview, this slide at least, of how you may choose to adopt, say, an agile delivery, perhaps via sprints. And this approach is something that Will and myself and colleagues within our professional services team often adopt when we're trying to structure our development and testing portion. So you'll see that we talk about sprints, and sprints are really just a time-boxed unit of development. It could be 1, it could be 2 weeks, who knows, but it's the portion of this phase which is dedicated just to building bots and just to getting them designed, developed, tested and ready for production. So as I said, this is an agile based approach, and we believe the benefits of using an agile approach are that you're looping the customer in a lot more regularly than you would be if it was, say, a waterfall, a more traditional based approach. So at the end of every sprint, at the end of every cycle, you're conducting user acceptance testing. So this is the feature that we've implemented. Customer, does this meet the needs of what we agreed when we solution designed it back in the discovery and design phase, and are the outputs matching the outputs that you would expect? So by continuously looping the customer in, you're potentially avoiding any mistakes, which then mean you have to go back in time and redevelop. So in theory, it should be more efficient. And because you're working in sprints, in theory, you're focusing on specific features. So you've got that dedicated unit of time just to focus on one specific feature. And perhaps you're understanding the link a bit better between effort points and delivery. So you're moving beyond the concept of, I've got a week of time, let's just deliver what we can in that. And you're thinking more about, okay, how long will it take us in effort points to develop this feature? But yeah, because you're focusing on incremental development, we believe it really lends itself well to reducing risk or being better able to mitigate risk, perhaps by bringing in additional developers or outsourcing or anything like that. But the bottom line is, whatever method you choose, whether it's a traditional development-based approach or it's something like this, which is predominantly agile, it doesn't really matter. There's many ways to build a bot, but the most important aspect is that you have an efficient methodology that works for you. And we say works for you because we recognize every organization is intrinsically different, and depending on where your RPA program sits, whether it's in the business, whether it's in IT, there'll be a completely different approach to development. But as long as it's coordinated, there's rigor behind it, and it works for you, that is by far the most important thing. Because if you don't, then you may fall into some of the common pitfalls when it comes to developing bots. And we'll discuss these and propose 3 ways to avoid them, and that is utilizing what we've termed the 3 R's. So that's reuse, resiliency, and rigor. So, on the topic of reuse, perhaps if I give you an example, actually, of a customer that I worked with recently. So, in fact, Will and I were doing a health check with this customer, so we were checking the status of their RPA program, where they'd got to, and this was in their financial business unit. So they had, I think, probably circa 50 bots which all interacted with Oracle. And we noticed that all of these 50 bots had a lot of the same logic, a lot of the same code when it came to interacting with Oracle. So the impact of that was, if Oracle was to suddenly change, to be upgraded, or perhaps if a certain element of Oracle was just to appear differently, then that could have resulted in a developer having to go into all 50 of those bots and make a change to get them fully functioning again. So I suggest thinking of reuse almost as templates. So in the same way within your organization, you'll have templates for corporate branding in the form of Word or PowerPoint documents. Think of reuse with bots in the same kind of manner, i.e. you're building a template or a reusable component. So in theory, if you build a bot once which interacts with Oracle, then you could have all 50 of those bots just utilizing that one other bot. So if Oracle does change, you're only having to change things once. You're not having to go into all 50 bots and continuously update them. So of course the impact of that is you're potentially spending a lot of development resource on maintenance or having to redesign things. So don't build something twice, and definitely don't build something 50 times. And it's particularly common we think in our large customers who perhaps have multiple development teams or have RPA programs going on in different arms of the business. It's really common. And so to get around that, we recommend building a bot inventory or a catalog. So perhaps when a developer finishes a bot, that bot gets documented or indexed in an inventory or catalog, so that before any new development on another bot takes place, say a program manager or another developer could peruse that catalog, could have a look and see if something's been built already. And it might be a case that, yeah, sure, you wanted to interact with Outlook and actually someone's built an Outlook bot and they've catalogued it, but you need a certain feature. Well, perhaps you could extend that functionality and perhaps that Outlook reuse bot could just be extended further. But the principle is that you're enabling reuse and you're promoting it as well by communicating what you've built via the catalog. My other tip is just to look at your program of work and look at the bots that you're going to be building in the future, perhaps in your backlog, in your pipeline. Work out what applications in your future bots are going to be used the most, and perhaps think about even dedicating a developer just to work on building reusable components. It could well be that actually by taking a developer out of building a process just to focus on a reusable component for an application, you're actually speeding up the development of future processes further down the line. So it's worth taking that holistic view of your program and working back to where the opportunity for building reuse, templates, whatever you want to call it, into your program. And I'll let Will talk about resiliency.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. So just going on to resiliency is one of the key second R's, I suppose, in terms of avoiding those common pitfalls. So the first thing around resiliency is making sure that you don't treat error or exception handling as an afterthought. So it's really, really important, and it's something that I've seen regularly across customer engagements that can be left to the side when you're designing a bot and then building the bot, is covering all of the different ways in which you need to handle the errors or exceptions that you're going to find in a given bot scenario. The happy path is obviously what everyone wants to see built and running, because that's how you gain value from the bot. But if you are not thinking about the errors and exceptions that might happen along the way, quite often you'll end up with bots that you have to rework further down the line, or you'll end up with errors that you're not quite sure how to handle in the bot, which is going to create a significant overhead that will impact your delivery capability for further bots. The next key point is logging bot steps as you work. So it can be something that's relatively painful to do, but it's really important to make sure that when you're building your bot, you're capturing the steps that the bot is completing as it runs, so that when you're actually developing, when you test that bot, you can see all of those different steps line by line in terms of the activity that's being completed. And that's critical, because when your bots are running, typically an unattended bot is running in an environment where you cannot see it completing its activities. So if that bot falls over and you need to work out why that's happened, it's critical that you can understand the step-by-step activity that bot's completed. And the best way to do that is to make sure that you're logging those activities. So it makes development easier, because you can see all of those bot steps and you can figure out potential areas that you might need to tweak in your code. And then further along the line, it reduces that overhead that's going to impact your ability to build more bots within your delivery team. The final key point, and this is in capital letters because it's pretty critical, and it's something that is always a challenge on an RPA delivery program, is that you need to try and get as closely as possible to equivalence between your development, your UAT, and your production environments. So this applies to two things. The first thing is that the environments in which your bots are going to be run when they're being tested, the environments in which they're being built, and then obviously the environment in which you're productionizing them to run end-to-end to complete the activities need to be as similar as possible. So you need to be using the same type of machine, the same settings, and the same applications in those environments. This means that when you're starting to test your bot in UAT and then moving it to production is far simpler. It means development will take less time because you're not having to go back and forth between testing and build. And ultimately, it's going to improve the longevity of the bot in production. The second key point is applications. So it's really important that the applications the bot's going to interact with to complete a given workflow have a test version with, as much as possible, equivalence to the production version in both the way in which it's being structured and configured, as well as the data that's available to the bot when it's testing and when you're testing workflows that the bot's going to complete, because that will save you a lot of time further down the line once you start to productionize that bot. I'll now hand over to Mr. Morris again to talk through rigor.
Cheers, Will. Yes, so the final R in the 3 R's is rigor, and I think of this as having a tight grip on the development and testing portion of the robotic development lifecycle. So the first thing to utilize to avoid a common pitfall is coding standards. And this perhaps sounds more grandiose than it really is, but a coding standards can, in their simplest form, be a Word document or even an Excel document which just say how a developer should lay out their code that they're working on in a bot. It could be as simple as stating how a variable should be named, making sure it's descriptive and it describes what it does. Or it could be ensuring that people are putting comments in the code at various useful points so that anyone who comes to read the bot's code cold can understand what's happening. Whilst bots are pretty straightforward to read and can be quite easy to grasp, by the time you get to a bot that's maybe over 20 lines long, or someone's been pouring all of their mind into structuring it, it can be difficult to understand that logic. So, coding standards may even set out something as simple as commenting or incorporating steps into how bots are developed. But the real benefit of having coding standards is that it enables you to onboard new developers more easily, knowing that they're likely going to have your bot's going to have a higher degree of quality. It also means when it comes to debugging bots, it's that much more straightforward because they all follow the same design patterns. Variables are the same, comments are the same, etc. And Will and I observe that customers who don't do this, so who don't say, these are the naming conventions that we like, or don't mandate how certain commands are used, then oftentimes they will be the ones that will experience a lot of pain when it comes to testing, particularly when it comes to handover and even when it comes to maintenance as well. So just a simple document explaining how things and how developers should maintain standards can be really, really key. And the final point is formalizing a methodology for development as well. So the previous slide where I was talking about how Will and myself may approach a delivery via an agile methodology, this is how you would develop bots, your methodology to doing that. It could be agile, sprint, it could be waterfall, but as long as you've formalized it, codified it, and it would enable perhaps an external party to come in and understand exactly how you go about doing things, then I think that's probably the most important thing you can do to adhere to rigor. So I want to expand on the topic of reuse by talking about the bot store. So hopefully you've all heard of the App Store. Well, this is the automation anywhere equivalent, the bot store. So I think as it stands at the minute, we've got circa 850 bots that are available, that are ready to download, and I'll give you guys a demo of the bot store shortly. We have, I think, circa 20 digital workers as well. So these are bots that are designed to carry out end-to-end roles, so they can think, they can act, they can analyze, and essentially this is just a huge catalogue of opportunity that you can peruse and perhaps get ideas as to what you could look to automate next. So the benefits of using the bot store are that because you're using a bot that's already been built, and you're going to be saving a significant amount of time when it comes to development. So even if the bot on the bot store doesn't have 100% of the functionality you need, it may be a case of perhaps it's got 70, 80%, and actually that would save you a few weeks anyway, and you just need to focus on developing the 20%, which would enable you to automate a process. But we estimate on average, a lot of organizations, when they're building a single bot, could speed up development to the tune of 70%. The next one is that you're leveraging experts from our partners and even from ourselves as well. So actually a bot on a bot store can be a really great way of seeing how other experts build bots too. I've used it in a number of ways and learned a number of really great tricks just by looking at how other people have gone about building bots. And if you're using A2019, our new RPA product, then you'll be able to leverage a lot of the APIs that we have in place. So the bots in the bot store will update themselves via the APIs. So again, it becomes another thing that you don't have to worry about in terms of maintenance. So not having to dedicate a portion of a developer's time to making sure that bots from the bot store are up to date and fully functioning. You know, it could have become another complexity to add into your RPA program if you're introducing someone else's code. But again, through APIs, it saves that because they'll update as the applications evolve. They go through our security program as well. So we've got a new security verification program on the bot store. I think there's 4 levels. So level 1 being it's scanned for malware, level 2 being the bot developer has undertaken security training, level 3 being that a threat model and a data flow diagram has been analyzed by our experts, and level 4 in that it's been fully penetration tested. So in theory, you'll be able to download a bot from the bot store and deploy reliably, knowing that the security verification is in place. I'm just going to show you some example logos of all of the applications which you may find on the bot store. And whilst you're perusing that, I'm just going to add a poll and ask you guys in the audience whether you're using the bot store at all. So hopefully you guys will be able to see a poll that's appeared on your webinar screen now, where you can select an option and hit vote. It would be useful to understand if the bot store is a key component in your RPA program. And perhaps while everyone's voting, Paul, it's worthwhile seeing if there's been any questions from the audience.
I've actually got quite a few, unsurprisingly, Ollie, but let's maybe start at the beginning a little bit. So when you talked about the 3 R's, you were talking about shared components. So there was a few questions from people that haven't built that way. So what would you recommend in regards to a deployment that's relatively heavy that doesn't have reuse built at the core of it, was the essence of the question.
Oh, that's a good question. Will, do you want to take that, or shall I?
Yeah, so I'll take that on. So, yeah, it's a common challenge that you will end up with, particularly customers that we go into with a health check, where you've ended up with a large number of bots that haven't been utilizing the shared component model. So the main thing is to make sure that you basically assess your bot estate and understand where you've got significant synergies that could represent an opportunity for shared components to be introduced. And it's about finding the right opportunity where it warrants any kind of bot rework that you might need to do in order to utilize those shared components. So typically you'll have 2 or 3 potential components that will have a major impact on your bot estate if you were to introduce them, where you'll be having significantly less complexity. So it's really about finding the balance and the most appropriate model to add those shared components if you are planning to add them to existing bots that are already there.
Thank you, Will. Actually, just another question while we're waiting for the poll, Ollie. You talked about the bot store. What kind of rigor does that go through, especially lots of concerns about safety of what you download? So what kind of standards are applied over the top of that so to ultimately have confidence that it's safe? To either you or Will?
Yeah, sure, I can answer that. So before a bot can ever be uploaded onto the bot store, an individual has to submit a request to our bot store team, who then ensure that 1, it's an active use case and it's worthy of being on the bot store. Sort of 2, that it's not already been built, and 3, to review to make sure that if the bot is built, it meets the high standards that we'd expect. I think no more so is this applied than when doing the security verification part of a bot. And when I give a quick demo on the bot store, I'll show how that comes into play. But I think in particular the addition of scanning for malware and even just ensuring that developers have a security certificate is absolutely key to making sure that it is something you can just download and use. I think we're conscious that implementing something which you don't own into your infrastructure and your security stack is a potential risk. So I think the hope through this security verification program is that this just won't be an issue.
Thanks, Ollie.
Right. Cheers, Paul. I see. So we've had circa 20 votes. I'll stop the voting now, and I can see that there's a decent sum of people who didn't know about the bot store, so 42%. But a strong cohort at 38 who have used it on occasion. So hopefully for these 42%, this will be a useful overview. So I just want to give an overview of the digital workers as well. So as I mentioned before, digital workers, these are aimed at really being able to automate a process end to end. So digital workers, they can think, so they can utilize IQ bots, our sort of document processing product. They can act via our RPA program, and they can also analyze, perhaps using a business intelligence tool, bot insight, what have you. So they really can do like the full suite of what a traditional worker can do. So just taking the, say, accounts payable administrator, a digital worker could extract information from an invoice, upload it into SAP or whatever system you're using, and potentially run a report. That's what a digital worker could do, so across a whole spectrum of a person's role. And then let's say take the IT admin at the top right for Google Cloud. Potentially a digital worker could reset a user's password if they've forgotten it, or if a new individual is being onboarded at your organization, they could give them access to G Suite, give them an email address. So there's a whole variety of digital workers that are available. And I would say that maybe some of these use cases aren't suitable for you because there's you're using Oracle instead of SAP for, say, the accounts payable administrator. But it can be a great place to go just to see what's possible and to try and generate ideas. So for those of you that have said, it's not suitable for our needs, I would say go on there and see what's being done, because even if it's not directly suitable, you can probably get some good ideas from it and understand the art of the possible. So yeah, I encourage you to take a look and to browse. And I will give you a demo now of the bot store. So hopefully you can see my screen here. So this is the botstore.automationanywhere.com. And you can see straight away that you're greeted by a huge variety, if I scroll down, of bots that are available to you. So you see on the left-hand side here, you have the application that the bot uses. So this one here is a Slack notification bot. And to the right, you can see the logo of the developer as well. So this is one that we've developed ourselves. So on the left-hand side, you can see you can even filter the bots down by the type of process, so finance, HR, sales, shipping, etc., even by category, and even by application too. So there's a whole variety of ways to filter these down, and I think you'll need that filter just scrolling down based on the amount of bots that are available to you. So I was working on a project earlier this week where we had an issue where the screen resolution was constantly changing on a bot. So we went straight to the bot store, and I think I just typed in screen resolution, hit search, and it took me to this bot, which actually coincidentally was built by one of the chaps in our team. So straight away you can see it lists the top benefits, so making sure the bot runs on the same screen resolution in production as it was developed on. So I knew just from reading that first bullet point, this was the one that would be most suitable. And then if I look to the right panel, I can see I've got, as part of the bot security program, a level 1 ticket, which means it's been scanned for malware. And I can see when it was last updated, first published, and also crucially what version it's suitable for. So at the minute, this is just available for version 11 of the enterprise, but also the community, and as of yet, not quite ready for a 2019. But I was doing this in the old version, so I could just hit download. And watch as this went straight into my downloads folder as a Microsoft installer. And it's worth pointing out as well, if I click on my name and go to downloads, I've got the option to copy a license key, and this is a key that I paste into the installer when I'm trying to install it on my development machine, and then before it goes into the control room. So it's just as simple as hitting copy to clipboard. So this is the bot store, botstore.automationanywhere.com. So yeah, available for you guys to browse and peruse at your leisure. And whilst I've got the browser open, I thought it's worthwhile mentioning, perhaps if you're new to Automation Anywhere or just developing in general, at automationanywhere.com products, we also have the Community Edition. So this is our cloud-based A2019, our new product, which we'll talk to you about. This is that version which you're able to access for free today online and start playing and getting a bit of exposure to RPA development if you don't have that already. So that's the bot store, and that's the Community Edition. And I just want to end by summarizing how to get the most from the bot store. And this is repeating points that I've already made, but the first thing is to identify if there are any bots on the bot store which are suitable for your needs. So perhaps review your pipeline, your backlog, and have a look at applications which you think in the future you'll probably be automating against. And go onto the bot store and see if it's already been built. And as I said, even if there's a bot on the bot store which is not 100% suitable to your needs, maybe there's a percentage, 50, 60 that you could still leverage and still save yourself that development time. A lot of customers I work with, the decision to automate a process is so heavily based on a positive ROI, and that ROI is linked with the cost of development, the cost that's paid to a developer to automate that process. So I would recommend perhaps assessing or reassessing processes that you've discounted for automation and see whether actually you could leverage the bot store and actually save a chunk of time on development, because then maybe it would shift towards the positive end of the ROI spectrum. And finally, contribute. So perhaps think about uploading your own bots onto the bot store for other customers to leverage. It could be that you can further your ROI by selling that on to other customers as well. So identify, assess, reassess, and contribute are the three ways that I think you could get the most out of the bot store. And I'll pass over to Will.
Thanks, Ollie. So obviously we've covered some of the common pitfalls. We've covered how the bot store can help you in terms of accelerating development. The next key thing that we're going to look at is how the new product version, Enterprise A2019, has a number of features in it which are effectively designed to make sure that your development process is as simple as possible, and as there are as many opportunities as possible that could be developed. So the first key piece, I'm not going to touch on this too much because there's a slide after this that goes into more detail on what actually benefits you can have from the cloud-enabled or cloud-deployed platform. But the key thing is that with Enterprise A2019, the product has been built from the ground up for the cloud. So we will go into that in some more detail, but that gives us some huge areas of benefits around development of bots and the speed at which you can develop bots. So the second key piece is that everything now in the product is a web-based interface. So if you're familiar with previous product versions, this is a significant shift away from the dependency on a desktop-based client to everything being within the web-based interface. It's now an extremely intuitive UI there for developing the bots, which we'll see in a minute. And that opens up a whole realm of possibilities around who can develop the bots, moving more towards the citizen developer model, as well as how easy it is for experienced developers to actually build bots as quickly as possible and as effectively as possible. The next key point is the universal recorder. So again, if you're familiar with previous product versions, there was a number of recorders available which were tailored to specific ways in which you'd want to record a process. So the recorder is basically there to capture a number of steps. So you would initiate your recording, you would then complete the process steps that you want to capture, and then basically the bot would be kind of automatically created in terms of a number of actions that represent the steps you took when recording. With A2019, there's now a universal recorder, so there's a single recorder that can be used to capture and automate processes. And the major thing is that this is constantly being updated to become more intelligent, so that it knows which applications it's handling, and it will suit or tailor the actions that are built into the bot based on the application that is being automated. So the idea is that you get to the point where, as much as possible, there is minimal manual activity to build a bot, because you're able to record it through the recorder and complete a significant percentage of the bot development just through the recording of the workflow, basically. Next key point is productivity packs. So with A2019 now, there's new ways to run bots, which is that you can run a bot directly within Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets. There's other productivity packs being worked on, but these are the two first primary use cases. And basically what that means is that a user via Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets within that application can actually launch a bot, feed it relevant data, and have the bot pass back data into the Excel file or the Google Sheet based on the bot's function. So this is basically opening up a more flexible model for the ways in which you can actually deploy a bot and have interaction between a user and that bot, which from a development perspective means that you'll avoid another common pitfall, which is that you try to shoehorn bots into use cases that might not necessarily fit the standard basic bot model. So this means you've got more flexibility in how you can build the bot, where it's a scenario that it might actually be more suitable that the bot is interacting with the user through Microsoft Excel or Google Sheet, for example. So it offers that flexibility, which means less development time taken up trying to build a bot that's not necessarily the current workflow that the users follow for their manual activity. And the next key point is interactive forms. So again, it's related to that interaction between users and the bots. But the key point is that with this model, attended automation, which is another common concept that often gets brought up, basically is far easier, and it's got far more interaction between the user and the bot. So similar point to the productivity pack is that with interactive forms, you can build bots where data can be passed between the bot and the user interactively as the bot runs. So it's preventing you from having to redesign the way in which the workflow might currently be completed, which adds complexity, which adds development time to your automation. So we'll just jump into a quick demo now in terms of a bot actually being built on the A2019 workbench. So it's worth mentioning that with all of this that you're seeing now, everything is available within the community edition of Automation Anywhere, which we can provide links to as well, which you can use to get to grips with the product itself. But this is an example flow that you can see. So what you can see on the screen is the web interface that we've now got with A2019. So this is the workbench, we call it, and there's three core components to that workbench. So on the left-hand side, you have actions. So think of these as the building blocks for which you will be using to build a bot. So if you need a bot to interact with Outlook or emails or Excel, then there will be a set of relevant actions for interacting with emails or interacting with Excel. That's where you'll get those from. In the middle, you can see the workbench view where you're actually dragging and dropping actions to build your bot workflow. So again, it's all very intuitive, it's very visual. The idea being that it's as easy as possible to map out what would be a process flow as a bot that can actually run to complete that automated task. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see the action details panel. So as this user is currently dropping in actions, you'll see the options become available on the right-hand side to tailor that action to the required feature or functionality. So here we're actually adding in an if statement into there. We're completing a number of actions in there. So they're entering the details of a message box, content of a message box that's going to be presented when the bot runs. They're then going to be creating a file. So again, on the right-hand side, you can see them adding the parameters that need to go into there so that you know which file is going to be created by the bot. And they've just added another channel that the bot's going to flow through. So an else statement, again, you can see that it's all very visual. So a number of things will be added to the workflow. So this is a loop, so you can see that this action now that's entered is going to be looped over 10 times. Again, it's visually very easy to see how that's being built, and all of the detail is on the right-hand side where you're configuring those parameters. And then we're just going to add a few more actions to this flow before the bot's then going to be essentially run on the machine. So everything is built in the UI on the actual the browser, and then when you need to run that bot, there's a light touch bot agent that's installed onto the machine, which provides the connection between the control room and the bot that actually enables that bot to run. So you can see here that the file is going to be created via the run, so the message boxes start appearing that have been configured by the user. The bot's then going to complete its relevant activity creating that file, and then once the bot's completed, you can see the output data. So that's how easy and intuitive it is to build a bot with A2019. Great. So we'll just jump back to the slides. And what I'll just cover now is the point that I touched on very briefly in the previous slide, which is how the cloud-based delivery model that's now available with A2019 can significantly improve the speed at which you can develop bots and the speed at which you can utilize the platform. So the first key thing is faster time to value. So with the cloud-based model, as you'd expect, everything on the Automation Anywhere side, so I guess just a brief introduction, with A2019 Cloud, Automation Anywhere would host all of the back-end infrastructure for yourself as a customer. So you are given access to a URL to the control room, which has that workbench we saw previously, and that's what you use to build all of your bots, to manage your bots, schedule your bots. So from an IT perspective, there is minimal infrastructure that needs to be looked after by the customer. It's all being handled via Automation Anywhere. So the key first point is that the actual deployment of a customer environment in Automation Anywhere's infrastructure is instantaneous. So it's all automated. Once the request is in place, it's built to the standard specifications that we've got, which means that you're building bots in a matter of days instead of what is a common pitfall that I've seen from projects, which is that infrastructure gets left behind until the last minute. And one of the biggest delays to starting to build your bots is having the environments ready to actually build them. So that gets away from that problem completely because everything is automated, it's built by the best practice models, and it's available as soon as possible for development. The next key point is lower total cost of ownership. So again, with all of that infrastructure being handled via Automation Anywhere, you don't need to make significant investment on servers, on maintenance costs. Everything's being handled through that cloud-based model. High scalability is a key factor as well. So obviously these environments are being managed, they're being hosted. So as you need to scale up, scaling can be done very flexibly. You don't need to worry about additional infrastructure on your side, about adding clustered nodes, for example. All of that's being dealt with on the Automation Anywhere side, so it's as simple as possible. And in terms of business agility, so another critical factor, so many customers that we see will be really far behind on product versions because it's difficult for the customer to manage the updates of their software versions in an agile manner. So with A2019 Cloud, everything is constantly updated to the latest version with the latest technology and features available for building bots. And critically, the way that it's built means that existing bots in production aren't impacted when you update the Automation Anywhere platform. You've got full granular control on what parts of bots are updated when you update the platform, which is a major benefit because you're not going to be impacted from a business continuity perspective by those updates. And mobility is a huge factor as well. So something that we've seen in projects in the past that's really helpful is because everything's browser-based now, when you talk to a process SME and try to get an understanding of the workflow, typically they will show you an example of that workflow working. And you'll have to take that recording away. Maybe you did it on Teams or Skype or something like that. You'll take the recording away, You'll build a workflow in Visio, for example, and then you'll use that to build your bot. So with Automation Anywhere A2019 now, one of the key benefits that I've seen in the past is that you can actually install the bot agent onto the user's machine, access the control room from their browser, and you can record the steps while they're taking you through that workflow. So you've reduced the steps massively between design to development, because you can actually use the platform on their device without having to install any kind of thick desktop application, causing kind of challenges from an IT perspective. Everything's far simpler. And the final point is ease of adoption. So again, installation-wise, everything is done through a light touch bot agent on the customer infrastructure side, which means the installation is not a problem as it was with kind of thick desktop applications. So onboarding is much faster, which is obviously a key benefit when you're trying to scale up and deliver bots as soon as possible. Great. So next point is Discovery Bot. So we touched on it briefly at the start of the presentation, but it's a new feature available within Automation Anywhere. And it's really, really important for speed of bot development, which is why we've included it in this presentation. The critical mission statement of Discovery Bot is that it's integrated into the Automation Anywhere platform by default. It's built through Automation Anywhere, and it's using AI to discover processes and automatically create bots, which is probably the critical part here, is that it's actually helping the development cycle massively when you introduce this feature. So the key features, which we will look at in a bit more detail further down the line, is it's utilizing artificial intelligence. So it's got machine learning models that will be built into it, which will automate the process discovery process. So the idea is that if you had a number of users completing steps within a user workflow, maybe they've got different ways of completing a process, maybe they've got different processes that they're doing throughout the day, then you can use Discovery Bot to track all of those activities and actually give you insights into what would represent a potential process to automate, which can then be looked at by a user. Second key thing is prioritizing automation opportunities. So myself and Ollie, as a delivery team, as you'd expect, we love templates. We have a standard template that we use all the time for establishing your automation opportunities and prioritizing them. So the idea is that that stage of the process is built into Discovery Bot, into the platform, so that it's easier to do, all of the data is available to you, and you can much more easily and effectively understand what ROI you might have from an automation opportunity. And then the final point, obviously kind of does what it says on the tin, is that when you build these workflows out in Discovery Bot, what we'll see is that you can actually create bots automatically through those workflows. Because it's within the Automation Anywhere platform, it's something that we can do with that workflow, which is to take it from just a kind of process map, if you will, of the steps of the workflow, and actually just have that automatically built into the workbench so that you reduce the manual steps of a developer building each of those parts of the workflow. So I think we'll just jump into a demo now, showing what Discovery Bot can do. So the first key thing is that what we're going to see here is an example of a process, or what might be a process, which is how are invoices being rejected, or how are they being handled. So we're going to use Discovery Bot to understand what that process looks like. So we've got a process analyst that's going to be creating a process. So this means they've got a potential process or opportunity that they want to see how that is completed by the relevant team members. So Rose here is a business user that's going to be completing that process on the billing team. So she gets an invite into Discovery Bot. She can log in again to the control room because everything's integrated, access Discovery Bots, and then she has the option to start recording her workflow, which represents how she has completed this rejected invoices process. So now she'll start to complete the given activities of the process that she's doing, and you can see that as this is happening, Discovery Bot is recording all of the steps that she's going to complete. So she's opening Salesforce, she's using the search bar to find a relevant area for the product. She's then going to be picking up a file from here and downloading that file, and then she'll be going back into her emails and actually responding to this email with that relevant file that she's picked up. sending it to the customer. So all of these are just standard steps in the workflow for Rose as part of the team. You could have any number of team members completing their different workflows the way they do this process. You might find it's exactly the same. You might find slight differences in how they do it. But the key point is that you should find synergies, and it should represent potentially an opportunity for automation. So now what you can see is that Rose has got all of those steps captured in DiscoveryBot. She can go in and add comments around the steps that she's completed, which is going to be really helpful for the analyst further down the line, understanding the context behind all of these actions. And then she can submit that recording, which makes it available to an analyst. So now the analyst can go in there, find the relevant recordings of that workflow. So there's a number in here, one of which is Rose's. See a set of dashboard views on what that's actually looked like in terms of how the users completed it, how long it took them to complete the workflow, and actually start to analyze the different stages of this process and have a look at the details. The next key point is the comparison piece. So this is something that's going to become more and more intelligent in DiscoveryBot, but at the moment the process analyst can go into this comparison view and see all the different workflows that different users have completed, and then an aggregated view that DiscoveryBot puts together, which shows you the similar steps that each user has completed, which might represent the base flow that you need to follow. So now the analyst is creating an opportunity through this, so they've had a look through, they're confident that it's an opportunity. They're adding certain details around the savings that they might have from that process, which means that it can now be prioritized, which is where the RPA manager now comes in to have a look at the opportunities. They can see that pipeline, including the new flow that's been put in there for the rejected invoices. They can see all of the steps in there, and they can now convert that to the bots. So this is now the automatic creation of a bot through those flows. So you can see that the key principle here is that what DiscoveryBot's doing is making the end-to-end process you will follow from initial opportunity through to development of bots as seamless and quick as possible, which fundamentally is going to improve the speed at which you can actually develop bots. Great. So just going back to the slides. So what I'll just show you now is a quick view on what the roadmap looks like for DiscoveryBot over the course of the next year. So the first point is version 1 of this coming in Q2 of this year. It's got 3 things to it. So it's recording of the user actions, it's developing that into process flows and descriptions with guiding screenshots on the actions happening, and then the capability for the expert to analyze those processes. So it's tackling that first part of the process flow that you saw in that demo. The second, which is a V1.1 that's coming pretty much very quickly after V1, so still in Q2 of this year, is where you actually then take that workflow and you automatically generate an RPA bot through the workflow. And obviously then you get the visibility of multiple processes by multiple users. You start to be able to aggregate at a bigger scale. And then the final version point is that when we get slightly further down the year, so Q3 of this year, this is when you get the AI-driven discovery piece of the product. So this is where you start to find patterns in workflows. You'll start to have the solution automatically recommend to you opportunities for automation, and you're going to have those opportunities then generated automatically as bots. So I'll just hand back over for us to go through the actual recap of what we've discussed on this webinar.
Thanks, Will. Yeah, so just to recap, so hopefully we've covered the common pitfalls with RPA and how these can be mitigated with the 3 Rs, so reuse, resiliency, and rigor. How the bot store could save you some development effort and potentially help improve your return on investment with Automation Anywhere. And Will's taking you through the benefits of the new Enterprise A2019, developing bots in the cloud and just generally having the platform hosted in the cloud as well. And finally, we covered the potential of automatically discovering processes for automation, and at the end of this year, being able to have them auto-populated and developed via DiscoveryBot.
Thank you, Ollie, for that, and Will, of course. So the questions are starting to flow pretty quickly here. So we've got a few minutes to the two of you. Hopefully you can kind of freestyle a little bit as I ask you some of the bits that are coming through. So I think the first one we had quite early in the session was around using the shared components, the reusability piece. So the question is then, if you create additional bots, can we only use the one feature of the main bot? Can you just explain the connectivity between the bot you're reusing and connecting to additional processes that are connecting to that? The bots working with bots. Maybe a question for Will?
Yeah, for sure. So the way that we look at reuse and shared components typically is that you break it down onto an application level. So if you've got a target application that a bot's going to use quite commonly, then one of the models you can do is to break that down into the screens of the application and then the objects within that screen that you're going to be utilizing. And you can actually build individual bots that will handle each of those individual objects so that you basically make it as granular as possible, so that you don't have a problem where a bot might be able to use a certain reusable component in parts and not other parts of the reusable component. So basically start from the bottom with really granular building blocks and build those up into sub-bots that then match into your main bot so that you never have a problem with too many features being in a reusable component.
Thank you, Will, and I'll stay with you for the next one as well. Coding standards. Do we have recommended coded standards that we can share?
Yeah, so we've got a standard set of coding practices that we follow with all of our customers. So yeah, that's not an issue to share those.
And just to help you on that, Will, I was frantically searching that as you were answering. So for those that aren't aware, there is a customer website called docs.automationanywhere.com. So anything from installers to documentation, and there's quite a bit on coding standards. So for those of you that are interested, it's docs.automationanywhere.com, and you should be able to get onto that pretty much straight away. So thank you, Will. Ollie, we've got a question here about two-factor authentication. I can't get my words out today. And about how that works in regards to downloading of bank statements. So a few challenges that the person that's asked the question has got. So any advice that you can give, and have you come across that before?
Yeah, that's is a great question. And Will, I don't know if you've got any insight into this as well, but yeah, I'll just offer my 2 cents. So I noticed in particular the person in question has asked about downloading bank statements using 2FA. So one thing I will say before I get into two-factor is certainly in the UK and I believe in Europe there are open banking standards where you can download bank transactional data via APIs. So that could always be one method to look at to just avoid two-factor authentication in general. But to cover the topic of two-factor authentication, yeah, it is a common one which comes up quite regularly. And first and foremost, I would say make sure your bots have the same privileges as a human would. So however a human is interacting with an application, ensure that the bot does as well. Now, if that's with a physical level of two-factor authentication, then yeah, that's a problem. I don't believe we're working on a physical arm for Automation Anywhere that can, insert a card into a keyboard. But if there is, say, a digital token which could be pulled, say, from CyberArk, there's a CyberArk bot on the bot store which could be used to consume credentials via an API. That could be a possibility. Or, quite simply, it could perhaps be a policy issue whereby the bot could be given very specific roles and responsibilities to access the banking system to make sure that perhaps all it can do is just view a particular portion of the data. That might be some way to appease and set the mind at ease of the internal and external auditors. But yeah, generally speaking, however humans are accessing it at the minute via two-factor authentication, see if you can get the bots to do the same as well. Well, I'm not sure if there's anything to add from your side as well.
Yeah, no, I'm going to move you on. I'm going to move you on just because we're literally at the top of the hour. I've got one question about pricing here. My advice is all of the pricing's on automationanywhere.com. We've just announced some new pricing for some of the smaller enterprises who want to touch us to a smaller level. So that information is at automationanywhere.com. So please have a look or speak to your account manager or your customer success manager. So on that note, I thank everyone for their time, particularly Ollie and Will. I thought that was really insightful. So I think we'll call it quits at that. So thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.